In this video we shall discuss how to work with JSON format. In the first task we have to show all books along with their authors and genres, but books titles and authors names duplication is not allowed here, and the result should be displayed in the JSON format. You may also see the second task of this topic for details on the general solution here. The expected result for this task is the next. Here we see books titles, here we see information about authors and information about genres. And this information is presented in the JSON format. As the discussion about JSON is outside the boundaries of our course, please find that information yourself. In all solutions for all DBMSs, we shall follow ideas presented in the second solution in this topic. And here in MySQL we shall use two common table expressions. Previously in that topic, in these places, we were using such function as group concat. And one may say that it's the only difference here. Instead of group concat, we are using first JSON object to transform the data into the JSON format, and then JSON array egg performs the same operation as group concat, but for JSON data. And that's all. All other operations here are exactly the same as in that solution. In Microsoft SQL Server, we are also following all ideas from that solution from that topic. Previously, in these two places, we were using such function as string egg. But unfortunately, in Microsoft SQL Server, there is no simple way to produce JSON data, so we have to compose that JSON format manually here. And that's how we achieve that expected result. You may see that we are also using string egg function here, the same function we used in that solution. But we are playing with its parameters to produce the data in the JSON format. And so, in the first common table expression, we produce the list of authors' IDs and authors' names. And in the second common table expression, we are performing the same operations to produce lists of genres' IDs and genres' names. And that's really all. All other ideas here are the same as in that solution. In Oracle, we are also following ideas from that solution from that topic. Previously, in that solution, we were using in these places list egg function. And like with MySQL, with Oracle, we may use simple and convenient functions to compose JSON data. Here are those functions. The first one produces a JSON object from a text data. And the second function performs the same operations for JSON data as list egg does for string data. So we need two common table expressions to produce lists of authors' IDs and names and genres' IDs and names. And like in both previous cases for MySQL and Microsoft SQL Server, that's all because all other ideas are the same as in this solution. In the second task, we have to parse the JSON data from the first solution and produce a table with columns for books titles, authors' IDs, names, genres' IDs, names. The expected result for this task is the next. Here we see our books titles, authors' IDs, authors' names, genres' IDs, genres' names. Obviously, we have to extract that data from somewhere, and that somewhere is these tables. For each book we have to store some identifier, then the book title, then the information about authors' names and IDs, and then the information about genres' names and IDs. Also, please pay attention that in MySQL we may use special JSON data type, but in Microsoft SQL Server and Oracle we have to use strings here, and then we have to use check constraints in both DBMSs to enforce JSON format on those strings. Finally, we may use data from the solution 1 to compose such a data set. Here we see our books titles, then information about authors, and then information about genres, IDs, names, IDs, names. To parse that data in MySQL, first we have to make some preparations. We have to create such a stored function that will receive the JSON data and the field name as the input parameters. And then inside the function we shall scan through the JSON document, we shall take each element, transform it into text representation and compose the final result from those elements. Once that function is ready, we only have to write such a simple SQL query. We are selecting books titles as is, and then we are using our function to extract information about authors' IDs, names, genres IDs and names, and to present that information in the form described in the task. In the solution for Microsoft SQL Server, we have to use two common table expressions. This is the first and the second is on the next slide. The main idea here is to use OpenJSON syntax and cross-apply operator to produce the following data. Imagine we have a book with two authors. So for that book, imagine its ID is 5. There will be two strings with the first author ID and name and the second author ID and name. Then in this part of the query we are using string egg functions to transform those columns into rows. So it will be 7, 8, then the first author name, then the second author name. And of course it will be a single line per book, with the ID 5 in our case. Then in the second common table expression we are performing the same operations to produce the following data. Imagine that book with ID 5. Here we get the list of its genres IDs, for instance 8, 11, and the genres names. Finally, we have to join the results from the initial table, then from the first common table expression and from the second common table expression. So, as the second common table expression gives us that data and the first common table expression gives us the same information but about authors' IDs and authors' names, here we are combining that data into one single row about that book, then authors' IDs, authors' names, genres IDs, genres names, exactly as it was told by the task. In Oracle we shall follow the same basic approach, but here we shall need 4 common table expressions. Here is the first, here is the second, the third and the fourth will be seen on the next slide. Here we use JSON table function to extract information about authors' IDs and to present that information as a column. Then we use list egg function to transform that column into a single line. Then in the next common table expression we have to perform exactly the same operations for authors' names. Then in the third common table expression we have to perform the same operations for genres IDs. And in the fourth common table expression we have to perform the same operations for genres names. Finally, we have to join data from the initial table, from the first, the second, the third and the fourth common table expressions, and that's how we achieve the expected result.